Welcome, everyone. I think we'll get going here. We're expecting quite a few participants in today's webinar, so we'll have folks joining us as we get underway. I'd like to welcome you all. My name is Vishna Zaborski-Breton. I'm with the Canadian Parks and Recreation Association, and I'd like to welcome you to this CPRA webinar, the Canadian Physical Literacy Puzzle. There's been, as I mentioned in today's topic, so we should have a full house. CPRA has hosted a number of webinars over the last couple of years which provide tools, resources, and best practices for parks and recreation practitioners across Canada. Webinars have included topics such as connecting to nature, recreation programming in the after-school time period, and a session on children's mental health with High Five. For a full listing of past webinars and to learn about upcoming presentations, please stay tuned to the CPRA website at www.cpra.ca and follow us on Facebook and Twitter. I'd like to welcome our presenters today, Richard Way and Philip Hockman. Richard is the interim CEO of the Canadian Sport for Life, and Philip is a former member of the CPRA Board of Directors. He represented Recreation Nova Scotia for many years, and he's a current member of the CS4L Community Connections team. Richard and Flip joined us for a webinar a couple years ago on building enhanced collaboration between recreation and sport, and CPRA is very pleased that they could join us again today. We have a very comprehensive deck today on physical literacy and the great work that CS4L is doing in this area. Just a couple of housekeeping items. During today's presentation, there will be opportunities for you to participate in the discussion through polls that will pop up on your screen or in the chat box to the right of your screen. Following today's presentation, we'll have a chance to answer a few evaluation questions, and if there's time, we'll have a Q&A session in the chat box as well. I'd like to thank the Leisure Information Network for providing us with the technical support for today's webinar, and should we need any assistance, Jennifer Pelche is on the call with us. And at this time, I'd like to turn things over to Philip and Richard.
Hi, thanks very much. And I want to thank CPRA and Lynn. Thank you, Vishna and Jennifer, for setting everything up today. For today's webinar, we're going to be moving fast, covering many items. We're not going to go very deep into those items. For questions, please use your text box, and either Flip and I will be responding. Also, I see a lot of really great people online who are doing really good work around physical literacy, so please contribute in the text box to share what you're doing or websites that are informative and linked to the topic that is being presented. As Jennifer said, we will be taking a poll, so there'll be many questions, and since we're moving very quickly from slide to slide, you'll have to click quickly to share your responses. And the goal of this webinar is really to increase awareness of the multiple actions that are being undertaken in Canada. However, I'm sure that I will miss things, so again, please add those things that I'm missing into the text box. It's not so much of an educational webinar as really just an awareness webinar. So without further ado, away we go. So again, just as background, I know most of you are aware of this, but Canadian Sport for Life, we look at the three key outcomes, and that is developing physical literacy, and that underpins a pathway to excellence, and then linking to being active for life and maintaining that physical literacy across the lifespan so that we have an active population. We are using a 7-stage model for those three outcomes, and as you can see, going through the different stages in a person's kind of pathway or physically active life, leading up towards that train to win excellence, or being competitive for fit to life, and valuing all those as opposed to the pyramid model that has been used in the past, which is a structured system of exclusion. When we talk about physical literacy in its simplest form, is physical literacy is the ability, desire, and confidence to be active for life. And so we'll revisit this a little bit, but that's a very basic explanation of physical literacy. We also would look at movement is the child's first language. So we believe that this is the first thing a child does, and but it needs to be nurtured over time in appropriate ways. We also recognize that we have a very diverse nation with many jurisdictions, cultures, and language, and so when we're developing resources and tools, we need to be, one, culturally sensitive, as well as recognize the differences in jurisdictions. And I see that actually on the webinar today, we do have people from that smell the West Coast air out here in Victoria all the way to Newfoundland, where I'm sure that, well, it's a little early to be seeing icebergs, but we do have a very diverse country, so we recognize that in the resource development. When we look about enhancing or being a catalyst for physical literacy within Canada, we look at it from a perspective of there's 4 key sectors, and that would be recreation, sport, education, and health, and that those 4 sectors collaborating to enhance physical literacy is the optimal situation as opposed to operating independently. One of our sayings is that it takes a village to raise a physically literate child, and that village, of course, is led by recreation, sport, health, and education. We also see that, and this would be specific to people that are on the line, that in terms of engaging in enhancing physical literacy of Canadian children, or the lifelong physical literacy of people, that each of you or your organizations can engage in different things at different times. So whether it's awareness, education, training, resources and tools, engagement, policy, or research, that each of you may want to enter this circle in different places and different kind of different positions, and there isn't necessarily that you enter at a number 1 and work your way through. It's you enter where you need to be. So that these different items on the circle here are actually the way this webinar is structured, and we're going to start at awareness in terms of just again quickly overviewing what are the different awareness mechanisms out there to inform people around physical literacy. What can you use? And again, we look at it from that organized sport, that pathway to podium performances, the sport and school sport, physical education, the after-school setting, recreation, and lifelong participation with health and wellness at the center of it all. So when we talk about physical literacy information, we have a website, as Flip has put in, www.physicalliteracy.ca, and on that website, you'll find things like the physical literacy assessment for youth, which we'll talk a little bit about later, physical literacy injury prevention. So there's a very good movement preparation resource that's on that tool or on that website that if we have a lot of coaches using those tools, we can maybe reduce the number of ACL injuries. That's what our research is starting to show. There's community connections where there's a host of resources on that website. So this again is a resource that this website has a lot of resources in it. There's also the Active for Life resource that I'm just giving a few moments for everyone to answer this poll. We'll just give a few moments, and then we'll move on to the next slide. So we can see it's about 50-50 in terms of being on the physicalliteracy.ca in the last month. So again, it's a resource to be on or to go on because there's lots of different bits of information there. Then there's the Active for Life website, and again we'll run a poll in terms of whether you've been on this site, and it has a lot of information that is targeted for the parents. So again, if you're in an organization where you want to raise the education of your parents, and those parents are consumers of your programs, this is a great website to use and to send information out to your parents for them to have a better understanding of the value of signing into your programs, whether they be in an education or recreation setting or sports setting, of course. So we've got about a 60-40 on activeforlife.ca. Thank you for responding. When we also have the social marketing of Participation, who are out there in terms of trying to increase the awareness of Canadians that play is important. If we can get that poll up, then we can see how many of you have been engaged around Participation. In this case, you'll also, depending on the jurisdiction you're in, there's a variety of ads that are on television, and there's been an initiative in British Columbia where there's some very, very good ads in terms of taking away the space from kids to be able to play. So in terms of being on Participation, it looks like a 40-60 in terms of yes. So there are these tools for your organizations to use to increase the awareness of your clients or around Participation. In some jurisdictions, provincial jurisdictions, there are specific websites, as in Saskatchewan here, where they have Growing Young Movers, and then there's also Sask in Motion, there's Manitoba in Motion. So there's a variety of other websites that are encouraging physical activity, and in the case of Saskatchewan, it's very specific to working together to inspire children and youth towards physical literacy. So these awareness tools are out there for you to use. And then moving on to education and training, a little bit of research. And before I do that, you can see in the chat box, again, if you have any other websites that you think would be great to share with the group, please do. And as you can see that Flip is putting in the links to those websites so that you can easily access them in the future. Around education and training, for physical literacy, we have Canadian Sport for Life community workshops. One is becoming a Canadian Sport for Life community, and that's where we go in and facilitate communities coming together. And often we're in a situation in communities where in a Canadian Sport for Life workshop, people from education, health, sport, and recreation will be introducing themselves, having never met each other within a community, because there's been no kind of thread across those four sectors that has allowed for discussion amongst those four sectors. And so one of the exciting things is when we see this occur with everyone in those four sectors wanting to talk and discuss how they can contribute to developing physical literacy within their community. We also see recreation professionals, physical literacy education happening, and schools like Everactive Schools. Here's an example in Alberta, where Everactive Schools, they put on a physical literacy summer institute that I think has been sold out in the last year, and again, it's a way of communicating, and there's great things that are going on, especially in I would say Alberta and BC, around in BC around the Pacific Sport, where they have physical literacy coordinators funded by Via Sport throughout the province of BC in the 6 regions. Correct me if I'm wrong, Via Sport in the text box, and then in the Everactive Schools, as well as in the Fit for Life centers. I might have got that wrong. Throughout Alberta, where there's the 9 centers, where again they're advancing physical literacy within the regions of Alberta. We also see emerging physical literacy community summits, where champions in communities in Canada have put together summits to bring together people from their city or region and to learn more about physical literacy. The first and the largest is the first. It was the Hamilton Physical Literacy Summit in the first year, where they had about 400 people attend, and then last year they called it the Ontario Physical Literacy Summit, where they had, I think, about 660 delegates attend a 1.5-day summit in the Hamilton area. There's also last year a summit, a physical literacy Canadian Sport for Life summit in Kingston, and maybe Linda, you could put in the text box how many people attended, because I can't remember exactly. We see there was also a New Brunswick Physical Literacy Summit, and I know that there's one planned for November in Nova Scotia. So we see where different communities across Canada, the champions within those communities are stepping up and organizing educational opportunities for people within their community.
Richard, if I may, in the one in New Brunswick, we had about 100 participants, and I know there's also, I think, a summit scheduled, physical literacy summit scheduled for Winnipeg. I think it's in March of this year.
In March, and that's correct. That's correct. Titled Physical Literacy, the Gateway to Physical Activity. And I think they're planning for about 250, 300 people, because we're sending resources out to them. Any other ones that you can think of, Flip?
Those are the only ones that I know that are scheduled, with specific dates as of now.
Okay, great. And Flip, yeah, thanks for jumping in.
No problem.
And so yes, we also see within the Canadian Sport for Life Summit, we'll have physical literacy streams and community streams. And one of the certainly impressions that I took away from the last Canadian Sport for Life Summit was just how many communities are really engaging and activating their community and really affecting, improving the delivery of sport and physical activity in their communities by using the factors and principles of Canadian Sport for Life and the information that's being shared around physical literacy. Is just really exciting to see. Great to see that we have some text box action in terms of Burlington's planning one, and Niagara is doing something in February as well. So keep sharing on the Dropbox. That's fantastic. So yes, the National Summit. This was for last year, and next year it'll be the same weekend in Gatineau. We have about 500 people that come in, and a real full program of great presenters in the National Summit. So we look forward to any of you online being able to attend that. It's offered on an annual basis, and always has physical literacy and community workshops embedded. Yes, of course, Ron, there is your Kamloops session that's coming up this weekend. Dr. Dean Creelers and Drew Mitchell, who's the Director of Physical Literacy with the Canadian Sport for Life, are on the road right now presenting in, I think it's maybe Langley and Maple Ridge today and Surrey tomorrow, and then we'll be heading up to Kamloops for a big summit this weekend. So this is great to see that basically it's being done within the community and connecting and activating communities. We also have a big international physical literacy conference that's scheduled for June 13th to 16th in Vancouver. For those of you who are fans of the Canadian women's soccer team, they won't be playing at that time in Vancouver. However, there will be games on the 12th and on the 16th in Vancouver. So we hope that many of you can make it down. The registration is open. However, the information on the different speakers is not up there yet. It will be up there soon, and I can assure you that there's going to be a great lineup of people in that conference. And so I encourage, if you can make it, to make it. And if you're coming from out of town, I would book your hotel rooms at the Wall Center as soon as possible, because there's a lot of pressure on rooms. Apparently, just before our conference, there's a conference in Vancouver of dermatologists, 15,000 dermatologists. So if you want to come a little early and work on your complexion, you can probably do that too. Great to see that there's a lot of people who are maybe or coming to the conference. So when we move to resources and tools, there's a lot of different resources and tools that are being developed throughout the different organizations. But first I'll start with quality sport programs. One of the things that we've been doing over the past decade has been working with the national sport organizations to ensure that they're offering quality programming at the different stages of development. we have a recommended quality sport programs, and this was actually first requested by Recreation Newfoundland. I was out in Newfoundland making a presentation a few years ago, and the recreation group said, "Geez, could we get a list of programs that you would recommend, you being Canadian Sport for Life, would recommend that we utilize within our communities?" And so we put this list together, and this is in working with the national sport organizations. These are the programs that we see that are consistent with Canadian Sport for Life factors and principles. And so I think Flip is going to put up a link to where you can find that. It's in the RBC Learn to Play as one location, as well as on our website. So from a sport quality programs, this is an excellent resource to take a look at.
And Richard, a key point is to make sure that the community coach, if they're implementing a program, sport program, that it's the appropriate sport program. So, for example, if it's for young boys or girls in baseball, they should be doing a rally cap. And unfortunately, a lot of the coaches who maybe been there several years may not even be aware of the existing program that should be implemented, i.e., rally cap in baseball, as one example.
Yes, that's an excellent point, Flip, in that for those recreation professionals that are on the line, to ask the minor sport organizations to say, hey, again, using the example of rally cap is are you utilizing rally cap within your community? We know in terms of working with the national sport organizations that the use of these programs often result in actually increased participation as compared to programs that have been traditionally used. And again, rally cap is really a replacement for T-ball, and T-ball is somewhat of an institution, but has shown in terms of the stats that kids sign into baseball and actually their numbers drop through the T-ball years, whereas when rally cap is utilized, the numbers are maintained, which is resulting in increased registration into baseball. So these are quality programs. If you haven't taken a look at it, then take a look at it. I see a question of Trevor there, and Philip will respond. So yeah, there's a number of you online that haven't seen that list, and I would encourage you to go and take a look at that list, and then link to the programs that of the sports you may be interested in. I'm not going to get into any detail here, but we also have a lot of work being done around physical literacy and using circus training to develop physical literacy. And of course, there's circus schools around Canada and around the world, and our leading people are doing a lot of work with Cirque du Soleil, both in development of skills as well as prevention of injuries by ensuring that their complete repertoire of being physically literate. Looks like only half a slide has come up here, so I'm going to just click ahead, and maybe the other half will come. There we go.
There we go.
So High Five is another organization, a partner organization of Canadian Sport for Life, and High Five, of course, is a quality assurance program that all of you that would be within the recreation sector would be very familiar with, and High Five is embedding the foundations of long-term participant development, long-term athlete development, and physical literacy into their resources. So another great organization with great resources to assist in delivering quality programs. When we talk about inclusion and developing physical literacy in a wide range of children who have a variety of abilities, excuse me, we're working right now with the Canadian Paralympic Committee in developing a physical literacy assessment for para-kids, and so that's on the horizon. Nothing available for your use yet, but this is to just have you be aware that that is in development. Also in development is Aboriginal Sport for Life, where we're working with the Aboriginal community across Canada and partnered with the Aboriginal Sports Circle in developing a couple of resources. One, Aboriginal long-term participant development, as well as Aboriginal Sport for Life. And so the Aboriginal community are informing us on how to make the Canadian Sport for Life materials culturally relevant. And our intent there is to create some sessions, workshops where we can have the Aboriginal community working in communities to improve the quality of sport using Canadian Sport for Life and physical literacy. We're also working on physical literacy environmental assessment, so nicknamed acronym PLE. In this environmental assessment, it will be looking at what are the spaces that are going to enhance the development of physical literacy. So that's in the works right now, and we're about halfway through. Nothing to really share at this point, but I just wanted to give everyone on the call a heads up that is in development. Also being created is the physical literacy observation tool. The physical literacy assessment for youth and other tools only are valid down to the age of 7. So we've been working, it's led by the university, Mount Royal University in Calgary, where they've been working on an observation tool that will really be targeted at early childhood education settings, where the early childhood educators can use this tool to observe kids and then be able to make interventions to assist kids in developing physical literacy. So that tool is now at the point where we're going to be piloting in a number of communities in Canada. I know that we're looking at Windsor to do a pilot. I think Red Deer and Calgary are doing pilots. So there's a number of communities where we're just piloting this tool to then ensure that it's valid and a tool that it can be scaled out across Canada. Play Safe initiatives. We're working in Ontario with Brandy Tannenbaum, and if you've not seen the short presentation on physical literacy as a vaccine presented by Brandy at the Canadian Sport for Life Summit, it's a great short presentation that I encourage you all to be able to see. in terms of play safe, it's using physical literacy and developing physical literacy across the lifespan to reduce injuries. The numbers around the cost of hip injuries due to falls in an aging population in Canada are absolutely astronomical, and so Play Safe and are looking at how do they utilize physical literacy to continue to have a mobile population that doesn't result in injuries. So it's great and leading work in that sector.
We'll get back to it later.
Okay. So I've actually lost my arrows to advance the slides at the bottom of my.
Hi, Richard.
Yes.
Hi, just give me one moment. I'm just having a little bit of a issue with the connection on my end. So we're just going to take one moment, and then I'll do that for you.
It might be on the website when we have the final.
Okay, while we're doing that, because I can't advance the slides, keep throwing your comments in, and to Lambton Public Health. The physical literacy as a vaccine was. I don't think that it was actually taped at that presentation.
It wasn't taped, eh? Okay.
And so I'm not sure if it's actually available online. However, the slides would be available online at Canadian Sport for Life if you go into the resource section and look in the 2015 Summit presentations. That I haven't actually checked to make sure that it's there, but however, it should be there. Oh, looks like we're back up and running. I've got my arrow back. So then, as we continue and talk about engagement, national, provincial, regional, local, when we talk about sport and physical literacy and developing really good movers in sport, there are examples that are happening across the country. I will feature one of the biggest, if not the biggest, provincial organization in the country, which is the Ontario Soccer Association, who has really identified that developing physical literacy in their through soccer, contributing through soccer, is one of their goals, and I'll actually relate that to one of previous Canadian men's soccer coaches, Stephen Hart, who now is unfortunately the coach in Trinidad and Tobago, but one of his comments coming back from a major tournament, when I asked him, how can Canadian soccer improve, and one of his comments was that we need to have a more physically literate athlete, because our athleticism of our top athletes, our top players, do not match the athleticism of some of the countries that we're competing with, and so part and parcel of that recognition within soccer has been that the Ontario Soccer Association has recognized that to embed within their training the development of physical literacy and the participation in other activities, which is an evolution of thinking for sports. So we see that happening in multiple sport settings, which is an evolution. And now we move to communities. We are fortunate to get a grant from the McConnell Family Foundation where we could develop, do some work with 9 communities across Canada. And those communities have been really lead. When I referred earlier on the www.physicalliteracy.ca in the Community Connections section, in that section we have a lot of materials that have emerged from this McConnell 9 project, and those materials are specifically developed by communities for communities. So, and then that McConnell 9 has then connected to physical literacy in communities and work with RBC, which is now funding almost up to $1 million a year in grants, which has been matched by the Public Health Agency of Canada. So they're now, Flip, I think it's 28
community grants were issued the past year, and we're hoping to have as many, if not more, in the in 2015. And by the way, the applications will be going online in early March. So again, if you go to the RBC site that we just posted, you'll be able to see download the application for financial assistance. And again, there are 2 types of grants. There's one called the Community Program Grant, which is up to $25,000, although they've just changed the name to Leadership Grant, and then the Program Grant, which is up to $10,000. They just changed the name to the Community Grant. But anyway, there are 2 types of grants: the $25,000 grant maximum, and then the $10,000 grant maximum for a specific program, as opposed to a community development process.
So we can see that many of you know about this grant program, which is great, and we encourage you to make application. What Canadian Sport for Life has in our Community Connections group is we've developed mentors that are working with communities across Canada. Flip is one of the mentors, and those mentors are available really. I don't want to inundate their time, but if you if you want to connect with Canadian Sport for Life, connect with Flip and others to get advice in terms of making your application. We're available to help as we move forward, because there will be a similar amount of grants being available in this coming year, and one of the philosophies that we have is that because there's tremendous work being done in the community, is that Canadian Sport for Life is an aggregator of those best practices and a share to share those best practices out to other communities. I'm not sure how many of you online would have signed up for the Canadian Sport for Life Community Connections email, but in the e-news. But in that Community Connections e-news, community is featured each time, identifying the different programs that they're working on. So if you go into the archives of those e-newses, which usually have about 3 or 4 articles, they're not extensive, you can see what other communities are doing, and when your community is doing something that is along that lines, then there's the ability to make connections with other communities, so that we don't continually invent wheels, but we're more efficient in our development. We see physical literacy education initiatives happening across Canada. We see it. We see physical literacy being embedded into the provincial curriculums. The PHE Canada conference that's in Banff This coming April, May is its theme is physical literacy. So there's if you go to PHE Canada, you'll be able to find out about that conference. And again, it's physical literacy. It's in Banff, and there'll be lots of great information at that conference. So we see physical literacy being advanced in the education, in the area of education, and there's also a resource at PHE Canada, so you can you see that Philip's put in the link, or you Google PHE Canada physical literacy, and you'll end up here with information. We also see health units in Canada. As an example, the Windsor-Essex County Health Unit has put together a resource called Flourish, and it's a physical literacy resource for early childhood educators in Windsor-Essex County. So it's exciting to see how health is recognizing that physical literacy can be a positive impact in developing the health within a community, and now health is informing the population around movement and becoming really a partner within the community around ensuring that children's fundamental movement skills are developed along with their desire and confidence to be physically active. So we see some early work being done in. We particularly see this in Ontario around health engaging in this area. If anyone online knows of examples in other jurisdictions in Canada, please put them in the text box. So just trying to, there we go. Another area is when we talk about charting tools, assessment, and population surveillance. One of the great opportunities that we have around physical literacy is to change the dynamic of what we do within the sport and recreation fields. What I see, and this is a very general comment, but generally we see within the education system, because in the education system that everybody goes to school, we see the metrics around education being how much have children learned. Are they better in math? What are their scores in reading and writing, etc. However, in the recreation and sport area, a lot of times we see the metrics are around participation numbers, not necessarily the quality of the experience and the development that's going on. Rather, the metrics are how many people showed up. So it's just a bit of a difference between education and recreation and sport, where it's about the impact on the child versus whether the child showed up. Again, that's a broad generalization, and what we see the opportunity around charting and these tools that are being developed that we're just going to go through now. We see the opportunity to be able to the development of physical literacy, allowing us to identify where we need to make interventions. So the play tools, and Philip's put the link in. The play tools are a resource, and I can see that we're at 60-40 in terms of people knowing about them. So I do encourage those 40% to go and learn more about these play tools and how they can be utilized in programming. This is the website where you can go in and you can, it's a very user-friendly website in terms of it takes you through the steps to be able to do it without necessarily having to take courses on how to deliver this. So those are the play tools. In the education area, so for physical educators or even generalists within the school system, there are the play tools. Those are developed by PHE Canada, and they're available online for those educators. There's also the Canadian Assessment of Physical Literacy, and it's a strong tool around population surveillance. Again, there is an online site around the CAPL, as it's called. So we see that there's emerging ways to chart physical literacy to be able to assess how children are advancing. In working with OFIA and the Ontario government, there is created the My Personal Best program, and as you can see, you can go into the school-based program or the out-of-school-based program. In the out-of-school-based program, you'll end up in the play tools, and there now is an ability to enter your scores online and then print a report for your group. The intention of the group, the intention of the play tools is not to create a ranking within a group, but rather information to an individual so that they can chart their progress, as well as being able to look at a group and to say, well, you know what, this group, when we put this group together, we can see that their, as an example, their upper body skills are object control skills are not so good. Their lower body object control skills are very good. So we're not doing those kids a favor if we go and say, hey, let's play soccer, because we're not developing a well-rounded physically literate child if we're playing soccer all the time and their lower body object control skills are very good. It's, okay, we need to change the programming of this after-school group or whatever group that we have to do some basketball, volleyball, or other upper body object control sports so that we can develop our physical literacy. So those tools are now available for you to utilize within your communities. So moving on to research, funding, and policy, we can see that there's 3 Canadian policy papers, Canadian Sport Policy, Recreation Framework, and Act of 2020, and physical literacy cuts across those 3, and hopefully as we go forward would be a connecting thread for those 3. Also, just awareness around that there is an International Physical Literacy Association. There's lots of discussions around refining and defining physical literacy, and there is an International Physical Literacy Association website. And basically, Canadian Sport for Life, we follow this definition or description by Margaret Whitehead, Dr. Margaret Whitehead in 2014, and you can see within that there are essentially 5 components, and that's being the motivation, confidence, physical competence, as well as the knowledge and the valuing of physical activity, and so those underpin the work that we're doing. And again, simplified back to ability, desire, and confidence to be active for life. We're just as awareness, we're working with the United States. You can see Utah Sport for Life there, and the U.S. Hockey, which has created an ADM, which is essentially their LTAD, and then there's the Aspen Institute, which has created Project Play, which is reimagining youth sport in America, and one of the considerations there is developing physical literacy, and they're actually launching the Project Play playbook next week in Washington, and so there's some interesting information that's coming out of that, and so I would encourage you, again, just to look at the work that they've done, Aspen Institute Project Play, because it's again, good work, and the Americans have a very succinct and clear way of communicating messaging. So again, it's just something to put in your toolbox to continue to develop your communities. As mentioned, Canadian sport policy has physical literacy as a foundation, and so due to that, we see different provincial territorial initiatives that are happening, whether it be sport or recreation, and as an example, Via Sport here in BC identifies Canadian Sport for Life with physical literacy as one of their key pillars within their strategic plan. And we see those plans happening across Canada in various ways. As I mentioned before, physical literacy is embedded in curriculum, and now we're seeing city sport policies. I know a number of you online have city sport policies, and it looks like Flip is disconnected, so he has a number of links to city sport policies, but I certainly know of the Vancouver Sport for Life citywide framework, City of Vancouver, City of Richmond, City of Winnipeg have different sport policies that are based in Sport for Life and physical literacy, and so if you're in different locations across Canada, to use those as best practices are available to you. Thanks, Christine, for putting up the City Winnipeg. We also are doing research, so we're working with Brock University in a number of sites across Ontario where we're taking the physical literacy assessment for youth and doing more research in the different communities. We've been working with OFIA, PHE, and Ontario, where we have been in 286 sites in their after-school setting and doing research that is now more than 5,000 kids in Ontario, and those results are showing very positive results, and we're working to get those written up into articles submitted to journals, which then will allow all of you to be able to have basically published research behind you when you go to be a catalyst to implement developing physical literacy programs within your community. So we're just about done here. And then, of course, there's funding. We and communities across Canada are looking at different things like foundations, like consumers and corporations. RBC partnered with Public Health Agency of Canada has been a great injection of funds into communities. We see Community Foundations of Canada and being looking to invest more around physical literacy. Probably the strongest example right now would be the Victoria Foundation that is invested in a number of physical literacy projects in Victoria, and I think Lindsay's online and can maybe pop in a few links on the programs that are done at the Pacific Institute of Sport Excellence around physical literacy that have been funded by the Victoria Foundation. So again, that's work that is being done to have more funders invest in developing physical literacy and sharing those. So that's it. I see that we've done 1 minute overtime here. So there's multiple websites that Flip has put into the text box, and we again, we've not gone deep in any of these areas, but we just wanted to, for today, to give you a very brief understanding and awareness of kind of the broad scope of the many things that are going on. So I thank you very much for your participation and contribution into the text box. And I'll turn it back over to Jennifer and Vishna.
Thank you so much, Richard. That was what a terrific presentation. The amount of information that's out there currently on physical literacy and all of the work that's being done in the sector is just, it's quite incredible. I'd like to thank you and Philip for taking your time and sharing your expertise and your knowledge with us all on this subject. As I mentioned, the tools and resources are numerous. And if anybody, I'm sure we could maybe even compile all those links and perhaps share them with the participants again. We want to thank everyone, realizing that our hour of time is up. If you do have any questions, feel free to email me at info@cpra.ca with any follow-up questions. We appreciate your input into the evaluation questions as participants. It helps us to structure our webinars, our future webinars, and to receive some vital feedback on the current one. So I'd like to thank everyone again for their participation and your time. Richard and Flip, it was just terrific. So thank you. Thank you all. Thank you for sharing, and we hope that you take part in a CPRA webinar again in the future.
Thank you all, guys.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thanks, Jennifer, for everything as well.